Welcome to this week's episode of the AUTOVATE Podcast. I'm so glad that you've joined us. My name is Cliff Banks. I am the host and co-founder of AUTOVATE. Earlier this week, I talked with noted automotive analyst Glenn Mercer. We debated where the market share for EVs will be in 2030. We also talked about autonomous vehicles and laughed and talked about my recent experience riding in a Waymo self-driving vehicle in Phoenix. We'll see if it gets me to my address or not. And of course, we hit dealership consolidation, and I will tell you, there are insights I'm pretty sure you likely haven't heard before. Welcome to the latest AUTOVATE podcast. We have with us today Glenn Mercer, who is one of the foremost analysts in the automotive retail and automotive space. Long history, was formerly a CIA analyst. He was also an analyst with McKinsey and was president of the Society of Automotive Analysts. Yeah. I'm thrilled to have Glenn with us today. Glenn was with us at AUTOVATE on stage last year in 2022, and he will be again kicking us off this year in 2023. His perspective on the automotive retail industry and knowledge is bar none the best in the industry, and it's his perspective is rational and realistic and not given into a lot of the hype and other crazy things that we hear from others looking at the industry. But Glenn, welcome. It's great to have you with us today. By the way, Glenn is joining us from San Francisco at the Micromobility Conference. What are some things you expect to see and hear?
Well, first of all, to go back a bit, and as Cliff knows me and enough of my audience at NADA conventions has seen, they're probably tired of me saying this, but the only thing I bring for sure that I know I bring to the world of analyzing the automotive industry, mostly in North America, is my advanced age at 68. So I first started working at McKinsey in automotive for the predecessor of Penske, United Auto Group, Marshall Goldman, back in 1985. So I bring the long-term perspective, and somewhere along the line, to answer your question, transportation got renamed mobility, and that apparently raised its PE multiple by a factor of 5 and its coolness factor by a factor of 10. Yeah. So I don't know why it's no longer just transportation, it's mobility now. Just like it's not a taxi, it's ride, hail, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things I do on a regular basis is I do work for NADA, the National Auto Dealer Association. And ever since late 2016, they've had me do an annual report, a digest of which I'll present at AUTOVATE, but then also at the Las Vegas convention next year on the challenges facing dealers on the longer term. So not the near term thing, like can I get used car inventory or, that kind of thing. Longer term, because as the old joke goes, for a dealer, the future is the end of the month, and the far-sighted ones go out a quarter. So long story short, I've been looking at sort of these longer term external trends out there, and one thing that keeps popping up is MaaS, mobility as a service. And the idea of this is somehow your phone will link you to scooters, buses, cars, rental cars, ferries, airplanes, and give you an integrated, seamless, and efficient transportation option. And I'm very interested in that because maybe this affects car sales and then dealers. And in a left coast, idyllic, utopian world, mobility as a service is so integrated and so efficient and so easy that personal car ownership starts to fall. And that's where I get interested. And, Finland, Helsinki was doing this for a while, and other cities try it from time to time.
Sure.
So I'm at the Micromobility Conference to see how that fits in. Micromobility essentially is a vehicle with wheels that weighs 500 kilograms or less. And it's already telling you something about micromobility. They didn't say 1,000 pounds, they said 500 kilograms. And so the biggest challenge I face in the conference here is not being run over by scooters, cargo bikes, and electric e-bikes running around the convention facility. But it's pretty interesting listening to them. That's a long introduction. To answer your question, what do I see in micromobility is still no particular threat to car ownership. But it's been interesting watching the industry grow up because I come to these conferences fairly regularly, and it's interesting to see we've moved from mostly shared micromobility, line scooters, to mostly owned micromobility, own my own scooter my own e-bike. A little bit like the initial founding of Apple computers, where it was sort of hippies interested in technology, and then it was taken over by technology, you know. This one too, I can see that. There's still plenty of tie-dyed shirts, and Grateful Dead
Right.
shirts, show floor, from people who are just, against the man and against the car and like bikes. But increasingly, there's Silicon Valley technologists and venture capitalists running around. And the third thing about the industry growing up is the explosion of form factors. Again, 15 years ago, if this concept even existed, you'd say, oh, you mean bikes and maybe skateboards? And
Right.
now we have e-bikes and cargo bikes and little enclosed, scooter things. And then the presence of regulation and lobbying. I never thought I'd see this, but this is like going to an NADA convention, how quickly these guys have realized we got to get in good with government. We are not just going to fight the government and apologize later. We got to get in good. We have to lobby them. We have to get the regulations in place. We really need incentives. Please give us incentives, which is against the Silicon Valley libertarian, mindset, which is, I don't want the government involved one way or the other. These guys are saying we need the government. The fire chief of the fire department of New York was here talking about battery fires. So it's growing up rapidly. It's been interesting to watch.
During the Detroit Auto Show a few weeks ago, it was fire experts from around the country talking about battery fires, how to put them out. Obviously a big issue. And I think as we get more e-bikes and scooters and whatnot, that becomes more of an issue.
I think it's related to the Silicon Valley mindset. And I'm not just taking shots at California because I live in cloudy Ohio, but which I think thinks of all these things more like cell phones than like cars. So it's like, I sold a scooter. If it wears out, go get a new one.
Right.
And I actually was sitting in the audience yesterday when somebody was on stage saying, you can make money repairing e-bikes and scooters, which if there was a car dealer in the room, they would have fallen off their chairs laughing.
Right.
Yeah, you can make money on this. Maybe you should think about repairing them. I don't know if your listeners know about Van Moof, the high-end, high-tech Dutch e-bike company, which made products everyone loved. They recently folded, but the amount of complaints on the floor about you can't fix a Van Moof. San Francisco is ground zero for all this stuff, right?
Right.
Van Moof had one repair facility in all the Bay Area.
Wow.
They just didn't think about, when your iPhone breaks, you go get a new one, right?
Right.
So interesting, again, watching this industry saying, well, maybe we can trade in used ones. Maybe we can fix the battery. We could even make money on these things.
Well, you and I both remember when NADA had a Segway at the convention. Yeah. And he was trying to convince dealers. That was pre-mobility, way before the whole mobility transition or hype.
I think the challenge for all these things related to the car is the Swiss Army knife of mobility. There may be hardly anything that it's perfect at, but it can do everything. It can carry some stuff, it can carry multiple people, carry one person, can go slow, can go fast, and all these other things around the corners of it, whether it's a Hertz rental car or, a rental by the hour cars to go or a scooter, they all can slice off a piece of it and be better at it than the car. I mean, a scooter is a better way to get around downtown Brooklyn than a car is, but when you need to be able to do everything and not plan ahead, the car pulls ahead again.
Real quick, as a sidelight, I think Turo, there's rumors that they are getting ready to launch an IPO here. Could be in the next couple of weeks, actually.
Yeah, I'm not against mobility services. I mean, we had Hertz. Hertz was founded in 1918. That's a mobility service.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. Go for it.
Well, when a lot of this conversation started in 2015-16 with the advent of Uber and Lyft, there's a lot of talk and chatter about private ownership going away and doing away with dealers. In fact, I was at a consumer bankers conference, I think in 2017, on stage with someone from California who stood up and proclaimed, your 8-year-old will not need a driver's license. That talk has pretty much died down, hasn't it?
Yeah, I was split into two pieces. One piece was, you'll never need to buy a car again because you can Uber everywhere. And the other piece is you'll never need to buy a car again because you can robo-taxi everywhere. So let's put the robo-taxi off to the side and just talk about human-driven Ubers and Lyfts.
Right.
Yeah, that really evaporated. And I think the Uber and Lyft, which let's face it, and again, they don't like to hear this on the left coast, it's a taxi. You give them money and they drive you somewhere, right?
Yes.
Okay, no, it's a tech company and it's got an app and everything. Though I do notice that Uber has been signing up taxi drivers left and right
Yes.
all across the
They are.
United States.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
anyway, the taxis become more like Uber. The Ubers become more like taxis. We meet in the
Taxis,
middle.
right. Right.
And I don't know if you saw also this past summer, Uber announced that now you can call an 800 number to summon a taxi, which after, $30 billion of losses, they've reinvented the taxi dispatcher. You may remember the old TV show Taxi, right? So we're
Yes.
back
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Of course.
Danny
Yeah.
DeVito on the phone sending you an Uber. But anyway, that has really died down. A chart I show, and I can show it AUTOVATE if you want, is
Yes.
I look at cars per household in the major urban areas in America, 2010, 2015, 2020. It's gone up, not down. So
Correct.
even
Right.
in San Francisco, the average household owns more cars now than it did before Uber launched. So, this is the place where if it was going to displace car ownership, we'd see it. We do not see it anywhere.
It seems like
In fact,
Uber and
others-
Lyft have driven ownership up, or
Yeah, drivers
Really?
instead of buying them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say mobility services in the ride-hail space, such as Uber and Lyft, have proven complementary to car ownership, not displacing car ownership.
Right.
Just like, in theory, if we got rid of all the airlines in America, we'd sell more cars because you're going to have to drive everywhere. You cannot take the airplane. So I guess in theory, at the margin, they've nibbled, but we haven't seen it happen. Now, robo-taxis might be different.
Well, interesting you bring that up. I am in a Waymo vehicle in Phoenix. I took 9 rides. I've just left the Phoenix airport. I'm heading to Scottsdale. I got to tell you, it was a fascinating experience. There's no driver. See the steering wheel turning, making a right-hand turn at a red light. Nicely executed. For some reason, I wasn't worried about getting into an accident. I'm running around downtown Scottsdale. I think I was more intrigued by the whole concept. So far, the rides have been fantastic. Emotionally or psychologically, it was hard to get away from envisioning or picturing an invisible person in that driver's seat. $6 to $9 fare, no tip, no uncomfortable, awkward conversations. We had one hiccup with a wrong turn, and it took the vehicle a little while to figure out where it was going, but it did, and everything was fine. I'm an autonomous vehicle skeptic and have been, but I'll tell you, this technology, if they're able to nail it in different kinds of weather and climates, this is a winner for me. In California, I think they're starting San Francisco, LA. They just started with Waymo. What's your perspective?
First of all, I don't know if it'll ever pay off. The amount of money
I know.
Or
Sure.
the billions that have been poured into this to replace basically a $12 an hour driver, I think that, like other things, will end up coexisting with them. But here's my question. These firms keep talking about the hardware and the software is getting cheaper and cheaper. The sensors are coming down lower and lower. So why wouldn't I just own my own robotaxi? Why wouldn't I buy a Mercedes S-Class and pay the $20,000 upcharge for full autonomous operation? Because it's exactly what happened with scooters, right? Which is, why would I pay Bird $5 every time I want to go anywhere, whereas I can get a foldable, collapsible scooter on my own for $500? And we saw that in Paris a little bit, where Paris banned shared scooters, but not owned scooters. Shared scooter, you drop in the Seine. The owned scooter, you bring home and take care of. So that's a question I have is the long-term play, why would I need a service provider for the robo-taxi?
Right.
Maybe I'm being an idiot when it comes to liability and software and backup and maintenance and things like that. But
yeah, Tesla has its FSD that people are paying $10,000 for.
Yeah. Last time I talked to Elon, which has been a while, he's pushing exactly that. And he has been pushing it, admittedly, for every 6 months for the past decade. And so I wonder if Waymo in the long run isn't really thinking of not running their own robo-taxis, but selling the software and hardware to, say, a Toyota, so they can sell you a level 4 version of your Camry. I don't know. Why do we assume that robo-taxis must be fleet-owned is my question.
Right. How about EVs? Now, I would not be surprised if in 2030, EV share is only 15% of the total North American sales numbers.
I'll do the caveat that'll get me out of this coming back to bite me later. I think if some administration puts even more money into incentives, that could distort it. But I think you're talking about the Biden administration's IRA runs its course. Whatever comes
Right.
after that is not quite so lucrative and massive. And,
Right.
we'll see. We end up at 50%. I guess I would probably go a little bit higher than that. But if what we're both agreeing is they're not a majority by 2030,
Yeah.
I guess I could see that. I think one of the challenges we face with EVs in the United States, and maybe it's in other countries as well, but I call it the curse of the sports metaphor. Americans are nuts for sports. And in sports, somebody wins and someone loses, right? And so I think right now we're in this mode of EV advocates saying EVs will win, and therefore everyone else must lose. No
Right.
fuel cells, no plug-in hybrids, no gasoline, no diesels, nothing. And I think in that scenario, I do not see EVs winning. I like horses for courses. Long haul Class 8 trucks, diesel.
Right.
Short haul, EV. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Garbage trucks, fantastic as electric, quiet and around town. And they go back every night somewhere and get charged up again. The biggest thing that personal annoyance is the disrespect that plug-in hybrids are getting, because I think
Oh, I know.
this is the optimal solution for most Americans. But again, because we have this view of EVs good, everything else bad,
Right.
we don't have plug-in hybrids. And I'll point out that in China, plug-in hybrid sales are growing faster than pure EV sales. And we think of China as the future, Anyway, so that was a bit of a digression, but you knew when you signed me up for this, you'd get digressions.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we're running into maybe pickup trucks, maybe EV is not quite right for that. And as the joke goes, America is a pickup truck market that sells cars just to fill up the rest of the showrooms. And who knows about Cybertruck? I mean, that is so far outside my experience, I can't even begin to estimate where that thing goes. Leaving that aside, EV pickup trucks, I don't know. And rural areas, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, we're adding more chargers all the time, et cetera, but the chargers are going to price the electricity right up against the level of gasoline. So remember when EVs first came out, it was, they'd be so much cheaper to operate because electricity would be cheaper. Well, yeah, if you plug in at home, maybe until you overload the local grid. And then on the road, chargers are not cheap. I own an EV. I figured, hey, I got to try it out. And, still, I don't know. So I guess, my hope is we would have a more balanced view of the future and say, let's have hybrids, plug-in hybrids, EVs, even diesels, filthy, horrible diesels,
Right. Sure.
Coexisting. And so would I go as low as 15? I'd probably go higher than 15, if only because California is going to be like 100%.
Yeah.
And it's a huge market, and Washington and Oregon follow. Yep. And all New England goes. So I'll go with 30% or lower. I guess, which is
So the impact on the dealership as more EVs, let's say we do get to that 30+%.
Right.
I think OEMs have been talking and have pushed dealers into these initiatives, EV initiatives with their service departments in their facilities. But too much too soon, do you think? I mean,
yeah. First of all, I think as the average dealer increasingly has multiple stores, I think what's really grinding their gears is, Volvo wants this, GM wants this, and Ford wants this. So, all these are all different levels of stuff, charges and stuff. And I'm completely unsympathetic to the idea of having consumer-facing chargers at dealerships. If I were a Chevy dealership, I'd park a Chevy branded charger at the Walmart locally and advertise.
Absolutely.
As opposed to drive to my dealership and plug in there.
100%. Yeah.
But so on the one hand, I'm very sympathetic to dealers complaining about this. On the other hand, we've been doing this forever. If you want to carry the new Corvette, you have to buy like $25,000 worth of special tools. So suck it up and invest.
Yeah.
That being said, the long-term impact, which is something that NADA has been very interested in, and I've been very interested in, I think one of the problems here is we make the leap. And the leap here, for each of these things, AVs, EVs, et cetera, there's like one number that everybody focuses on, and they leap from that. So they say the electric motor has only one moving part.
Yeah, true.
Therefore, EVs will require no service.
Right.
Yeah, which is ludicrous, right? The best estimates I've seen is about a 40% decline in both repair and a 40% decline in maintenance. So how do you deal with that? Well, first of all, it's going to take forever to feather in because you got 280 million cars on the road.
Yes,
So it's going to take a while to feather in.
Sure.
I say to dealers, don't panic, but act now. We talk to Norwegian dealers because they're living their future, right? We talked to Møller Bill, which I probably just mispronounced the name of the company. It was 65 stores in Sweden and Norway, and said in Norway, 85% of your new sales are pure EV. Absolutely amazing. He says, what has it been like on the service base? And he says, we're living with it. We're making money up on tires because these things chew tires up. So that helps offset. We're making money on collision repair because these things are very expensive to fix on collision repair, doing that. Another thing we're doing is we're holding share. As one dealer in America told me, Nissan dealer, he says, I don't make much money on each Leaf I sell, but I get all of them back because the aftermarket is not yet geared up for that. So good service retention. Yours to lose, dealers. The aftermarket's coming after you, these things.
Yes.
And I'm selling more F&I. If somebody says, I just paid $80,000 for this EV, I do not know if the battery's going to burst into flame. I do not know if the battery's going to crap out in 7 years, et cetera, et cetera. Give me an extended warranty on the EV side. So you add in F&I, you add in, et cetera. Right now, also, there's a lot of recall work and a lot of warranty work on EVs as they debug. So some dealers have said, I see that going up the more EVs I sell.
Sure.
So, and last point, and then I'll shut up, is we have seen this before. Remember when was it around? You're almost as elderly as I am. 1995, 2000, 2005, warranty work was evaporating. The bays would be empty.
Yes. Right.
And we filled it up. We filled them back up again. Yeah. So I'm not complacent. But I think dealers have to be on it. But I think the service bays will probably be okay.
I ride in Ubers all the time and talk to the drivers. And increasingly now I'm getting more EV-driven Ubers. Yeah. And it's fascinating hearing with the perspective of the drivers. One told me that he's owned one for 2 years. He's replaced the tires, I think, 3 times, and was getting ready to replace it a 4th. The other one told me he was in a Volvo EV. He's had it for over a year and no service yet. Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah. I have no pushback that eventually when EVs mature, will they require less maintenance repair?
Sure.
Absolutely agree. But are the things dealers can feather in that could offset that?
And like you said, it's going to take a long time. I mean, the cars being sold today that aren't EVs. I mean, we're looking at 12 and a half year life cycle of those, cars.
Yeah. And that EV, you mentioned Detroit, and what that, maybe get shot at in an AV, but Detroit potholes hurt an EV as much as they hurt an ICE. There's nothing different in the suspension, right? And with the weight of the battery, it could be worse.
It would be worse. Right. You mentioned a little bit about dealership consolidation. Where do you see that ending up? Or
well, at the let me first of all divide consolidation into 2 pieces. One is how many stores are there, and then how many owners are. So we had like 50,000 in 1955. It trended down steadily, and then we were at like 21,000 just before the Great Recession. We had the bankruptcies. Everything stepped down, mostly losing domestic stores to about 18,000, and then since then been dead flat.
It's been flat. Yes. Yep.
So the first consolidation is the dog that didn't bark in the night. That is, I think there was thinking that with the internet, I would no longer go to my nearest Ford dealer. I'd go to the one across town because I could see their inventory, and I'd go past the local one who was small and smelly or something like that, and go to the bigger one, and we'd have a consolidation of rooftops. Absolutely has not happened. And I think this is driven, in my view, by the suburbanization of America. The country just continues to sprawl, and we stay at 18,000 points now for 12 years, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't see that changing. And even Tesla, remember they said storeless for a while, and they reversed direction in like 2 days, right?
Yeah.
So, so I think we're okay on store count. Ownership, of course, I think we're running each year, the number of owners drops by about 3%. So steady, but slow, but steady reduction in owners as people say, I'm going to go from 1 store to 2, from 2 to 3. I'm leaving aside the big Publix and the giant chains for a second here.
Right.
There's lots of reasons given why that continues. People say, well, the dealers are getting older. Well, yeah, they've been getting older ever since 1910, so they've been getting older. So I don't put much credence to that. But, do I want to do another round of reinvestment in new stuff? And the OEMs have more and more control. I personally use the rubric of in the 1980s, you were a dealer, buy low, sell high. By the year 2010, you're a retailer.
Yeah.
And by the year 2030, I think you're a privately owned company store. It's like having a Burger King franchise. Is that lucrative? Do you like doing it? Yes. Are you going to touch the menu? Are you going to adjust prices? No, you are not. Right. Okay. So, I think we're headed that way. And a lot of dealers say, it's as lucrative as it was, or even more so, but it's not so much fun. And I'm going to get out. What hasn't happened is we thought that the public chains with their better funding would wipe out the little guy. And what I overlooked, a lot of other people, and something I think better than I do, is we overlooked the vendors. The vendors of the world looked at these little dealers and said, we're going to give you the software tools so you can gear up to be as productive as that big AutoNation store.
Sure.
It's a little bit like Shopify has helped the little mom and pop store survive against all the big stores in the area. It says, you don't have to spend the money developing all the software. Here it is in a box. And so I think the small dealers can stay in if they want. They may not want to stay in, but I think they can. And one last comment here. People say the end of the mom and pop store. The average NADA member store is $75 million in revenue. We don't have
mom and pop stores. No.
Yeah, maybe in Bug Tussle, Nebraska.
Right.
But that store has zero cost in its real estate. Everything's depreciated, and they're going to get service business for the rest of their lives. So they're just running on a different business model. So the mom and pops we have, I think, are safe. If there's any place where I think I'd be nervous is if I were like the 7th Chevrolet store in Fort Wayne or something, when you really only need 5 or something.
Right. Well, I think the number of Buick franchises has dropped significantly just because of the overall buyout, that GM instituted.
Yeah,
2 years ago.
You'll definitely have different brands going up and down.
Right.
But I think the total amount maybe stays steady.
Yeah, we've seen that. It's where 18,200 really has been where we've been, like you said, for the last 12 or so years.
It's amazing. I think people sort of listened to Wayne Zangar, rest in peace, who said, look how Blockbuster wiped out all the little mom and pop video stores, and AutoNation would do the same. And it hasn't. And no knock on AutoNation. I think the publics are effective, efficient, generating value for shareholders, but are they still less than about 10% of maybe 11 or 12%?
I don't think, maybe. I don't know. I mean, obviously Lithia's gone on the big buying spree, as has Asbury.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
But at some point, I mean, they're bumping up against, the limits, I think, of what they're allowed to buy, because you have the framework agreements in place by some of the manufacturers that govern and restrict based on certain criteria, how many they can own.
Your listeners should pay attention to you and read the Banks Report. I was not paid for this plug, but because I think you are really tuned into this. I am less tuned into it, but my gut feel is this continuous schizophrenia at the OEMs, which is, I want you to be big so you're efficient. And I want you to be small so I can push you around.
And so exactly.
I don't know where this is going to sort out. I do get gossip I get, and again, you would know, you're more plugged in than I am, is a gradual sort of easing on a case-by-case of framework limits. Like, if I see Hendrick or whatever has got 8 Honda stores and they're all in the upper tier of CSI and stuff like that, okay, I can go for 9 or 10 maybe, but that's just the sense I get. I don't really know.
Yeah. Well, I know of one that's going to start playing hardball.
Okay. Going the other way, right?
Yeah. And, I think as a dealer, large dealer group, you have to be all in with that manufacturer, buying parts, pushing your customers to their captive finance company. So we'll see some news leak out over the next several months, I believe.
You heard it here first, AUTOVATE listeners.
Back real quick to the mobility. I've got to ask you. Years ago, you were doing a presentation and you had a slide that was phenomenal. You framed it perfectly. This is the next great idea. You're taking investors. Schuber,
Yes,
It
yes.
was fractional shoe ownership.
Yeah, I didn't get many hundreds of millions of dollars there. Yeah, I was just joking around, as in we start out with cars,
Yes.
mobility,
Yeah.
and everybody. You mentioned Turo, cars to go, the car sharing. It works a little bit, doesn't work. Blah blah car works in Europe but not here, etc. And then we drop down to docked bikes and bike sharing, like City Bike in okay. Then we went to scooters. So we're getting smaller and smaller. I said, okay, the ultimate is I just put QR codes on pairs of Nikes and I leave them on sidewalks around Brooklyn, and you can just buy the stride or by the mile or the minute.
There you
can Schuber around. Some of them on your phone. But yeah, I'm open for investment still, but the money has not poured in.
Well, yeah, I've seen crazier ideas raise capital. So,
well, the craziest one, I hate to keep picking on them until they take their website down. I'm going to keep picking on them. Is Kangaroo, Cangoroo, a Swedish company, which is trying to do shared rental pogo sticks. And if you think I'm joking, I'm not. So go look. If they can do pogo sticks, I can do sneakers.
Yes, there you go. Glenn, this has been just so fascinating. I know you have a conference to get to, and so
I got a scooter over there, I guess.
And you got a scooter over there. I have actually wrecked a scooter, and I saw in Austin during one of our, I think it's second AUTOVATE, waiting outside the hotel 5 a.m. to go to the airport. A Uber driver almost hit someone on a scooter. The guy fell down. He picked up the scooter and threw it at the Uber vehicle.
There you go. See,
putting
the
a
scooter
big
has
dent
more than one
into
purpose. I know you want to move on, but I think that's one of the things that's being discussed at this conference here is when in the old days it was cars and bikes, you'd say, well, if you like bikes, we'll have bike lanes. But now as the form factors multiply in micromobility, you got skateboards, scooters, e-bikes, regular bikes, and these electric motorcycles, which are really quick. Do they all get stuck into the bike lane? Where do they go and how do they get sorted out? There's a big issue there. So we'll see how that works.
Well, I will let you go, but first, just want to remind all of our listeners that AUTOVATE is coming up December 6th through the 8th. And if you want to hear more of this phenomenal analysis from Glenn and others, just visit autovate.org and be sure to register. Glenn, I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I look forward to beautiful Scottsdale in December. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.